We are delighted to be together this morning. We're thankful that each one of you is here. We do have a number of visitors with us, and every last person in this room is special. Special because you've been created in the image of God. He has intended for you to live in this world, to prepare yourself to spend eternity with Him and to glorify Him while you're here. And so that makes us all important to Him, and we're glad that we can be together this morning to do what He intended for us to do in creating us, and that is to glorify His name. So thank you for being here and being a part of our worship assembly today. This morning I'd like to talk to you about the truth that sheep need shepherds. Disciples of Jesus are often described as sheep. I think we understand that. We're going to be studying about that a little bit from John 10 this morning, if you'd like to be turning over there. We, as disciples of Christ, are sheep, and we definitely need shepherds. Jesus has ordained that elders in the local churches fulfill this important role of being shepherds. In Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 11, the Apostle Paul said that he himself, talking about Jesus, gave some to be apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors. And a pastor is just a shepherd. And so Jesus gave pastors or shepherds to the church for a purpose. Obviously, he saw that churches needed shepherds, that they needed pastors. As we think about and sort of warm up to this topic this morning, I want to look at what Jesus has to say about himself as the good shepherd and his relationship to the sheep. We learn not only so much about Jesus as the good shepherd and so much about his relationship to us, but I think also a lot about our needs as sheep and why Jesus would compare us to sheep in John chapter 10. So go with me there, and let's notice how that shepherds and sheep have this very special relationship. In John chapter 10, let's read in verse 1. Jesus said, "Most assuredly I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, and they know his voice." The sheep of Jesus know the shepherd. The sheep of any shepherd know the shepherd. They recognize his voice. They are possessed by him. In two verses here, Jesus talks about how he owns the sheep. There's this very special relationship. They are his, he is theirs, and they know one another intimately. They recognize his voice, and they follow him. And the shepherd cares for the sheep because the sheep need care. And the shepherd is willing to give himself all the way to the point of death to care for these sheep that are his own and that he loves and whose welfare he's concerned with. We skip down to verse 11. In this text, and he says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep." In verse 14, "I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and am known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep." So you see this very tender and intimate relationship between shepherd and sheep. You see the fact that the shepherd is going to care for the sheep, and he's going to commit to doing that all the way to giving his entire life for their well-being. This comparison and this explanation of the relationship between shepherds and sheep sets the tone for us understanding elders and their work and the relationship that we as sheep ought to have with elders as our shepherds. Elders must be devoted to the sheep and willing to sacrifice their lives for the well-being of the sheep. But sheep need to know and love and honor and follow their shepherds. All of that is implicit in the reality that not only is Jesus the good shepherd and the shepherd of the sheep, but also that in local congregations, Jesus has ordained that we have those that the Bible calls shepherds, and that we honor them and follow them and know them the way sheep ought to follow shepherds. So elders have been appointed in churches as what we might call subordinate shepherds. They are not Jesus, they're fallible men, but they are shepherds nonetheless of local flocks serving under the chief shepherd. And this concept is beautifully put forth by the Apostle Peter in 1 Peter chapter 5. Turn over there and notice with me, starting in verse 1, the Apostle Peter says, "The elders who are among you, I exhort, I who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed, shepherd the flock of God, which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that does not fade away." This passage contains a lot of interesting information about shepherds in a congregation. One of the things that we see is that shepherds are to shepherd the flock of God that is among them. We also see that shepherds and elders and bishops or overseers are the same thing in this passage. You have Peter addressing the elders, verse 1. He tells them to shepherd the flock in verse 2. And then he tells them to serve as overseers, also in verse 2. And the word overseers comes from the Greek episkopos, and it is translated overseer, but also sometimes is translated bishop, same word. And so all of those words refer to this function, those who are leaders, those who are, by reason of qualification, of spiritual maturity, elders, shepherds, and overseers. But the main thing I want you to notice, and the reason we went to this text at this time, was to say, yeah, we have a chief shepherd. We have the good shepherd that Jesus is describing himself in John chapter 10. But in local congregations, we have shepherds who are answerable to the chief shepherd, but they nonetheless are shepherds of that local congregation. And that makes the local congregation their flock. And a flock will have certain responsibilities and obligations to those shepherds. But the main thing is, right now, the flock needs those shepherds, just like sheep need shepherds. The shepherds of a local flock, the elders, they don't have authority to legislate from above. That authority was given to apostles, not to elders in a local church. But they do have oversight. They do have overseeing authority, as we noticed in this passage. And you see that elsewhere as well. Acts chapter 20 and verse 28, the Apostle Paul there is talking to a group of elders who were the shepherds of the church at Ephesus. And he says in Acts 20 and 28, "Take heed to yourselves and to all the flock among which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood." And so again, you have in this passage, Acts 20:17 refers to these men as elders. Here they're called shepherds, or they're told to shepherd, and they're told to oversee. These are their responsibilities. The flock that is among them is their flock to take care of, the flock that is among them. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, we have the qualifications of elders laid out by Paul in this passage. And he says in verse 1 that this is a faithful saying: if a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach, not given to wine, not violent, not greedy for money, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not covetous, one who rules his own house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. For if a man does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? And so here again we see a responsibility of a shepherd. He oversees. He takes care of the church of God, which is the flock of God. There is to be a plurality of shepherds over each local flock. One individual can't do it. It takes a plurality of good men meeting certain qualifications ordained by the Spirit to be able to shepherd the flock. And so in the New Testament, we see them being appointed. Paul and Barnabas, we're familiar with the text in Acts 14 and verse 23, when they go back to churches that they planted, and they appointed elders in every church, it says, and they prayed with fasting, and they commended them to the Lord in whom they had believed. And in Titus chapter 1 and verse 5, the evangelist Titus is told that Paul left him in Crete, that he should set in order the things that are lacking and appoint elders in every city. Churches needed elders because shepherds need sheep, or sheep need shepherds, I should say. And so you see that implied in these passages. And so we read of churches that are organized and functioning with this plurality of elders. In Acts 15 and verse 4, a problem arises, and it has to do with the Jews requiring circumcision for Christians. And so Paul and Barnabas go down to Jerusalem. And it says in Acts 15 and verse 4, they came to Jerusalem, and they were received by the church with the apostles and elders, this plurality of shepherds. And again in Acts 20 and verse 17, Paul sent for the elders of the church at Ephesus when he was in Miletus. In Philippians 1 and verse 1, Paul and Timothy are bondservants of Jesus Christ, and they write, it says, to all the saints in Christ Jesus who are in Philippi with the bishops and deacons. And so this just lays some groundwork for understanding the need of local churches to have shepherds, and something about what the function of those shepherds is. I think we can see some of that, at least in these passages that we've looked at. What we as a flock need to understand is that without shepherds, we're very likely to be directionless and vulnerable. You see, elders have this unique place of leadership. To oversee, to tend, to guide, to protect, to provide for. And without them, a flock is just missing a really important component. They become easily vulnerable to the attacks of Satan, to the ways of the world that surround the flock. Merely being a flock does not provide enough protection and guidance. If you look at the natural world, there are a lot of animals that flock, or in the case of fish, school in big bunches. And they do that for a modicum of protection. That's the purpose. They're trying to be protected from, bigger predators. And it serves them, but it's not ideal, because, what flocks of birds, you ever heard the term bird brain? Birds aren't all that bright. And so while just being in a big flock offers some protection, what they really need is somebody maybe who can do the thinking for them, when the hawk comes or whatever it is, who can really get them in the best position, or who can actually defend them from some other bird of prey or some other animal, or from the net of a fowler or whatever it might be. The thing about shepherds is, sheep in a flock, that in itself offers a little bit of protection just by reason of the fact that they're flocking together, that there's a big group of them. But it's not nearly as effective as having shepherds who can protect them and lead them in the right way and help provide for their needs. Merely being a flock doesn't really provide enough protection. It doesn't give really any guidance and it does not ensure adequate provision and nourishment. In Psalm 23, the familiar Lord is my shepherd psalm, the Lord is my shepherd. Here's the sheep talking, right? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I've got a shepherd who's going to provide for me. What does he do? He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. I'm a sheep. I may not know where the green pastures are. I may not know where the still waters are. And if I do, I may not know how to get from here to there. I need a shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He restores my soul. I get lost sometimes. I need a shepherd to bring me back. He leads me in the paths of righteousness. He shows me the right way to go. I don't have to guess. Because I've got a shepherd that shows me. In its own flock. The sheep may not seek water on its own or move to greener pastures. It may, out of fear, not want to venture beyond what it feels is safe. Or on the other hand, it might get a false sense of security. I'm in this church, I'm in this flock, and so everything's okay. You may not realize it's a dangerous area. So what that tells us is that the opinion of the majority of the flock by itself is not really worth it. There are a lot of churches and even some with elders, but I think their idea is, well, if everybody thinks this is what needs to be done, that's what we're going to do. Because that's got to be the right way to go, right? Because everybody thinks that. If everybody in the flock, is thinking that we need to run off the cliff, I think there would be a lot of sheep that just do that. The flock needs guidance. Know where to go. The flock needs guidance to know where to go. Elders are to ensure that the sheep move in the right direction. Elders, shepherds, as we've already talked about, know the sheep. We saw this when we read in John chapter 10. The shepherd has the trust of the sheep. They know him, and he knows them.